Thanks for joining me for the first episode of Chef Johnny's Kitchen. Today we're going to talk about Chicago-style stuffed pizza like Giordano's, Edwardo's, Nancy's. We're going to make the sauce, we're going to make the dough, we're going to prepare it, we're going to bake it, but most importantly, we're going to enjoy it. Dough!
Okay, now we'll get started with the dough. The beauty of this recipe is that it's perfect for both stuffed pizza as well as a fabulous thin crust. It's going to make enough dough for 3 pizzas, either 10-inch stuffed or 14-inch thin crust. First things first, we'll heat up 14 ounces of water to 115 degrees. That's about a minute 45 in my microwave. Now we'll dissolve a tablespoon plus a half a teaspoon of salt, otherwise known as 3½ teaspoons, into the warm water. I use a wire whisk. Next, I'll add a tablespoon plus a teaspoon, or 4 teaspoons of yeast. I'm using Red Star Active Dry yeast. I've also used Fleischmann's Active Dry and SAF brand Instant Dry yeast. I haven't noticed any discernible difference among the taste or performance of any of them. And we'll set our timer for 7 minutes and let the yeast rehydrate. While the yeast is proofing, we'll divide the 2 pounds 2 ounces of flour in half into equal portions of 1 pound 1 ounce. Okay, the yeast is done. Before adding the water, salt, and yeast mixture, I give the flour a bit of a whisk to break up any lumps. Then I pour in the water, salt, and yeast. And before moving everything to the stand mixer, I like to mix everything by hand until it's initially blended and starting to come together. "5 minutes in the stand mixer with the dough hook. I started at the lowest speed first and then switched to speed number 2. Okay, while the dough is mixing, divide the remaining flour in half again. Each portion will now be about 8½ or 9 ounces. Now we'll add the second portion of flour, about 9 ounces, to the mix, along with the 3/4 cup of corn oil. We'll let this mix for about 3 to 5 minutes. Now we'll add the remaining portion of flour, about 8½ 9 ounces, and get it all mixed in there really well, and let that mix in the stand mixer for about another 5 minutes. Soak a kitchen towel in warm water to place on top of the dough, and we'll let it stand on the counter for about 2 hours. Okay, after the first rise, it should be roughly doubled in size. You'll notice I put plastic wrap on top of it to keep it from sticking to the towel. I'll just go ahead and punch this down, get the excess air out of it from the first rise, and then cover it back up with the plastic wrap and the towel and let it set on the counter to rise again for another 2 hours. Now that the dough has come to a second rise, I'm going to portion it into the dough balls that I'm going to allow to store. So I'll do my final punch down and then weigh it so I know what the total weight is, and then I'm going to go ahead and portion it or cut it into thirds. Weigh each one, make sure they're roughly equal. I can't stress how important it is to have a digital food scale. It makes your life so much easier. Now that they're portioned, I'll put them into Ziploc bags and then I'll label them with the date. I'll put them in the refrigerator for at least 24 hours before storing them in the freezer. When you're ready to use them, take them out of the freezer, thaw them in the fridge a day ahead of time, and then thaw them on the counter for at least 2 hours before rolling them out. Okay, time to make some sauce. Today I'm experimenting with the Nina brand San Marzano Italian peeled tomatoes. This is a big can that I bought for about $5 at Costco, but we'll only be using a portion of them in our sauce, and I'll save the rest for later. We'll also use a 28-ounce can of tomato puree. I'm still trying different brands of both peeled tomatoes and puree, but I haven't developed a clear preference yet to give you any strong recommendation of what's best. These canned tomatoes have a lot of water content, so I like to drain them in a stainless steel colander and crush each tomato to give it a chance to drain. Once it's drained, then I'm going to go ahead and mash it with a potato masher into smaller pieces. I've got my 28 ounces of puree, and now I'm going to add 28 ounces of the crushed tomatoes. Chop 2 small cloves of fresh garlic. Now I've laid out all the sauce ingredients and we'll go through them one by one. Light brown sugar, fresh chopped garlic, crushed red pepper, ground black pepper, oregano leaves, red wine. I'll stir the sauce and simmer it over low heat for about 10 to 20 minutes.